This January, a company from Norway working in the lithium-ion battery industry has announced some exciting news. Now, this particular company has announced that it signed an offtake with General Motors that will last up until 2033. This is Emin Askerov. I'm the host of What's Up with Startups, a podcast where I explore with my guests the challenges of scaling up climate technologies. We have all the technologies we need to avert the climate change if only we manage to deploy it at scale and in time. In my podcast, together with my guests, I pick apart tips and tactics that work and that don't. And today, I'm super excited because in this episode, we're going to deep dive into real life, first of a kind or FOAK in battery industry. Now, my guest today represents a Norwegian company that has successfully managed all the FOAK stages, doing pilots, demos, raising funds, securing offtakes, building and managing teams, you name it. And we will talk about all of it if the time allows. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please meet Vianode, the company that makes synthetic graphite anode material that has 90% less carbon footprint, and my guest today, Andreas Forfang, Vice President of Sustainability and Public Relations. Andreas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emin.
And we will get back to this wonderful announcement that your company made in January. I was really impressed when I read about it, about the offtake with General Motors. But before we go into it, please just give a little bit of background about the Vianode business and product and why it's so important in the fight against climate change.
Yeah, sure. So Vianode's product is synthetic graphite for batteries. And what we are doing is we have developed a new innovative technology that produces this graphite in a much better way. And actually in a normal battery, you have in a battery cell, graphite is the biggest material by weight. And you can have either mined graphites or synthetic graphite, as it's called. And if you want fast charge in your battery and if you want your battery to last very long, then synthetic graphite is the material that you want. So as a result, in most EVs, you have mainly synthetic graphite. And as a rule of thumb, for every 1 kilowatt hour of battery capacity, then you have about 1 kilogram of graphite. So if you have a 50 kilowatt hour battery, then you'll have about 50 kilograms of graphite. Or if you have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, then you'll have around 100 kilograms of graphite. And the problem, or there are two main challenges with graphite today. And the first one is that it's nearly all produced in China. And so about 95% of battery grade graphite comes from China. And that poses a risk to Western supply chains. And the second issue is that synthetic graphite is pretty hard to make and it can have a severe environmental footprint. So on average, it accounts for 20% of the CO2 emissions of battery production. And that is where Vianode comes in. We have developed a new technology that is much more resource efficient. So it uses less energy, less materials, and less consumables in the production. And the result of that is that we produce this graphite with 90% less CO2 emissions than the market average. And we are also financially competitive in operations. And on top of that, this new technology allows us to recycle the graphite from dead batteries or production scrap and back into new batteries. So, which is also something we see a lot of promise in, but it's a bit more for the future. So how we contribute to the climate is really twofold. Of course, we enable batteries, and the world is going to need a lot of batteries to decarbonize transportation and enable renewable energy production and enable an efficient grid and smart living and so on. And then the second one is that we make these batteries more sustainable to produce. So that was a summary of Vianode.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Actually, funny enough, I heard about Vianode only like a couple of months ago. That's me, that despite being in the battery industry since 2019. So for me, you were a bit in the stealth mode for a long time. I think only that news of the fact you had GM signing up on your product that really got through the noise. So I want to talk about your journey in the sense, and especially about going from pilot to like full scale. So you started in 2016, as I understand, and your first laboratory pilot was established in 2019, and then the first industrial scale facility was completed in 2021, just 2 years after. Can you please tell the difference between the two, between the pilot in 2019 and between the facility in 2021? Difference in scale and in scope. I mean, actually why it only took you 2 years to go from pilot to the full scale.
Absolutely. So a lot has happened in those years, and what we call the lab pilot is now actually a part of something called the Vianode Technology Center. But back then it wasn't, it was a different thing. And actually Vianode was started as a project within a company called Elkem. And Elkem is a global silicon and carbon producer. And with a huge R&D environment and excellent lab facilities. And through that, this innovation was created and Vianode was created. And when I joined Vianode in August 2019, nearly 6 years ago, then we had this lab pilot inside of Elkem's lab facilities, and we were able to scale it and tailor it with relatively small investment costs, which was a luxury to us, of course. And then we quickly realized that, well, of course, the lab pilot, what the advantage of that and the reason that we still have a lab pilot is that it allowed us back then to prototype our technology. It allows us to do product development on new products, on existing products, and also to do customer samples for initial customer samples at a small scale. But there was a need to verify this innovation that we had in industrial scale. It's quite a difference between lab scale equipment and industrial scale equipment, and size matters a lot, especially in clean tech innovation. So we were planning this industrial pilot, as we call it, when I got into Vianode, and that would also enable us to progress in the customer qualification journeys, because it would allow us to create more relevant samples and more high capacity samples. So that was, I think it was a natural step.
Just let's get a little bit specific, if you don't mind. The pilots that you had in the lab with Elkem, how many kilograms was it capable of producing the material, the anode material per year?
You should talk with my technology team if you want the details, but let's say it's a 10
Roughly.
kilogram samples in the lab and 100 kilogram samples in the industrial pilots.
Okay, so it was a 10x kind of growth, yeah.
Yeah.
And is this when you build this to the industrial scale, but you still call it a pilot? Interesting. So it's industrial scale pilot, but now you are. It's the one that is in Kristiansand, right? If I pronounce it correctly, Kristiansand.
Yeah.
And then after 3 years after that pilot, you opened another facility in Hiroya, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
And that Hiroya facility was actually your real first of a kind, full scale industrial facility, correct?
Yes, that's a full scale facility where we plan to have commercial operations.
Okay, just we'll come back to it in a second. Just before we go there, I'm interested to ask you about the industrial scale pilot, Because some people call it like a demo. Uh, some uh, some investors, when they give I read when they give recommendation, they completely miss this step. They think, okay, pilot is good, and then you go straight to FOAK, which is not the case actually. Seems to be in real life, as your example demonstrates, and I also saw some others who just say, no, no, you have to take it step by step. There's a pilot, there's a demo, or in your case, industrial scale pilot facility, and then there is the real FOAK. Now, in your case, you mentioned that if on industrial scale pilot facility, you used it to give samples to your potential customers that would be more like industrial grade, correct?
Yeah.
And but was it the only objective? Did you actually try to test maybe some assumptions you had about the manufacturing process or the equipment compatibility, how your material behaves, not in the lab environment, but more in industrial scale environment? Was this something you considered also during the
Yeah,
industrial?
absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, we have this innovation. No one has ever used it before. No one has produced these materials using that technology, and it's a very, very demanding process, taking you up to 3,000 degrees, and not a lot of people or a lot of types of equipment can do that. So there are a lot of technology risk, and taking this step or this stepwise scale up is very key to reducing that risk.
What was the biggest one which you faced, and the biggest problem in doing the industrial pilot, and what did you do about it as a company?
In building the pilot, you mean?
Maybe not
Or
especially in
planning it?
building.
Yeah.
Maybe I would say in total, like because of course there would be problem that you could separate the building phase with the actual running phase, but let's simplify here things a bit. Which
Mm.
which which part was the hardest and why?
It's hard to pinpoint one hardest challenge, but of course, I think we are, as a clean tech startup or scale up, continuously in this called catch-22 situation where you need to get financing in order to scale up and in order to proceed with customers, but you also need customer feedback in order to get financing. So the way to progress on that and keep moving that circle, pushing that circle is, of course, to take balanced steps. So you need to find the compromise between, okay, what do you need? How much scale do you need at this point? And trying to reduce the investment cost and attract investors.
So it was a
And
balancing act, kind of, yeah.
it is definitely a balancing act.
Mhm.
So, and of course, there are normal construction challenges that are probably not as interesting, but one challenge that is specific to scale up within anode technology is that you continuously want to develop this technology, right? But sometimes you have to freeze the concept, you have to freeze the design when building this, and that's of course the challenge. So
And
I
that
think,
happened, and
yeah,
that happened at your industrial pilot, right? This is
yeah,
when
and
you
that, yeah.
decided.
So it happens at every stage basically of the scale up, and I dare say that every plant we build will probably be a little bit different because we will continue to develop this concepts and this technology. But uh, it's especially important in the beginning. So while we produce the same products all the way through our journey, that's not Vianode's innovation. You know, our innovation is the process technology, production technology. So we've always been confident that we can deliver a very high quality product, top quality product that is um, suited for the most demanding batteries, EV type batteries. So the question has been more on uh, how well can we do it? How economic can we do it?
Okay, so it was not so much about the chemical, electrochemical properties of the anode, as I understand. So it was more about how do you optimize the production process to deliver like the best value.
I don't want to downplay the product. It is very hard to make and it is very important. But our key innovation is this new furnace to produce graphite. And if we manage that, then that is the hardest part to do.
Yeah. Forgive me if I do downplay the product, because that's actually I think what I do a lot of times in this podcast, because but that's not intentionally to downplay the product itself. It's just that I find a lot of time people talk about the product. I mean, most of the time startups, when I review interviews that the my guest gave before, most of the time my guest is asked about the product. What is the product? How good it is, and so on. And by the time I get the guest on air, usually everybody knows about the product. But what people usually don't know is about the process, how you got there. So, and when you said that the challenge is to fix and sometimes say, okay, stop, we're not innovating further. We actually now need to deliver. So a lot of founders I worked with kept telling me this. Yes, we know the hardest part was to actually say stop. Now we don't innovate anymore. I mean, I had it with wind turbines. I mean, wind turbines, it's big metal things. You need to kind of stamp them and just do them in the factory. But the engineering team was completely like tweaking this and tweaking that, and the manufacturing team couldn't just say, okay, guys, we just need to stop because we need to source like hundreds of these parts. Yeah, and in your case, um, what was the point when you said, okay, this is the when we stop developing, like, okay, the lab will continue working, but for the customer, because we had this, so we issued like these samples, like lab samples to customer. Now we issued pre-industrial scale samples, and the customer said, oh, I love it. Yeah, okay, now I want this product. Can you make like 100 times more of that? Yeah, so then you had, was it the customer or was it that sometime you said, okay, we just found like this is the perfect balance between the process and the quality and the product itself. Now we show it to customer, say if he likes it, then we just okay, we go.
Yeah, it's a combination. It's both. So obviously, as I said, you need both. You need to scale and prove your technology at scale and also reduce technology risk. And I think the industrial pilot was one of the really key steps in doing that. And but you also need this sampling capacity. And in automotive, the product qualification process is quite fixed. So you have steps often referred to as A, B, C, and even D. And as you advance through these steps, you need bigger samples, you need to produce them on relevant equipment, you have a lot more requirements. So it is also key to have that in mind.
Okay, great. Let's now move to the first of a kind factory in Hiroya. So let's start with size. So your industrial scale pilot was 10 times the size of your lab, and what is your first of a kind size?
Yeah, so if you convert the industrial pilot to theoretical capacity, it has a theoretical capacity of 200 tons per year. But the plant at Herøya, we call it Via 1, it has a capacity of 2,000 tons per year. So it's 10 times the size of that again. And
Okay.
it's a very, very big building, you know. So to do a sports analogy, if you imagine that the industrial pilot is when you're inside a basketball court with a very high ceiling, then the Via 1 at Herøya, it's more like being in a football stadium. It's huge.
Oh, wow. And what was the biggest challenge in building it? I'm specifically asking about the building now because of the sheer size of it. Um, when you were planning, constructing, commissioning, what was the biggest problem you faced?
And so it's obviously a complex projects being that big. And I think, you have normal construction challenges, staying on costs, pulling out procurement contracts, deliveries, and so on, which is always hard. And then you also have this same challenge, really, that you have to, at some point, freeze your technology development and say, stop, now we're doing this, and this is how it's going to look like. And you always have things that you really want to have in the scope and in the design that you have to take out or again stop developing because you need progress and you need to keep the investment cost as an acceptable level.
So how do you prioritize then? Is it money comes first? So for example, you have like a budget and you just need to state the budget, and if you see running over, you say, okay, well, can we take this away, or this particular fixture fitting or something? Or how do you prioritize this decision making?
And that's a complex task.
I
It's
mean,
yeah.
just give it. I understand because it's really complex, but what
Mm,
I'm digging at here is maybe tell the story which you like found most illustrative of this. Maybe it's
mm,
not like the biggest challenge you had or the most difficult, but it's a story that stuck with you as a kind of illustration of the complexity of the process.
mhm. I think to start the story, right, it starts with the pilot, industrial pilot in Kristiansand, which was operational in 2021. And that's also when we became a separate company, when we opened the Vianode Technology Center, and when we started looking for new investors. So we were owned by Elkem, but we saw that we need to bring in quite a lot of capital, quite a lot of financing. So we're looking for that. And since the pilot, so Via 1 is roughly, it's 3 years after the pilot, as you said. And 3 years is a lot of technology development. It's a lot of customer interactions. And we had, of course, gotten quite far. We had gotten bolder. Our customers believed in us more. And that was reflected in the design of the plant. It's much, much bigger. The equipment is much bigger. Our technology, the closed type furnaces that we have developed, they are much bigger in Via 1 than in the pilot, for example. And that is one key aspect here. Obviously, scale is important for economics, but it also requires capital to build scale. And so that's almost an impossible decision, how much are you willing to invest to improve the financials of the project?
Okay.
Yeah.
May I use this as a lead to the next question? So you decoupled kind of from your mothership in 2021, and you got new investors on board, and it was the same time when you were deciding you were trying to get your head around how big should the facility be, can we make it bigger, can we make it smaller, and it all kind of boiled to finance, but you did manage to get those investors on board. What what was the Pareto factor? What like 20% of arguments that convinced 80% of investors to say, okay, yeah, we trust Vianode, we go with them.
Yeah. That is not an easy task, obviously. So when we took the investment decision for Via 1 in September 2022, and at the same time we brought in Altor Equity Partners and Norsk Hydro as new owners. So then we had 3 owners in addition to Elkem, those two. And it was a pretty big investment. So the official number is 180 million euros. And of course, as I've touched upon, the key aspect of getting financing, getting investors is whether your customers believe in you and whether it's likely that you can get an offtake agreement. That is the most important factor. And we had advanced quite a lot at that time, but we were still pretty far away from an offtake agreement. As you know, it's 2.5 years between that date and when we announced the GM agreement. So why do they believe in it? It's obviously it's the sum of the product being top performance consistently and customers proving that. At that time, we had reduced quite a lot of the technology risk with the technology, so you had a lot more confidence that this would work. And then that again leads into that you can believe in the economics of the project and that it is very, very scalable. Also key. It's I think Vianode is a great example of that. You had it's in an industrial park, and what we did, we took over an old building inside the industrial park, repurposed that building, made it into our first full-scale plant, and so our footprint, is minimal when building that, and it's going to be hard to replicate exactly that for future plants, but it's not like mining, this is scalable, easily
But
scalable.
sorry to interrupt you. You just short clarification. You're talking about the 2,000 tons per year plant. This is the one you built inside an old one.
Yes, both
And
actually, both we did, yeah.
well. So if so basically investors saw, okay, they saw the product, they saw the risk of technology, but then they also saw that you have a progress with the clients, and despite the fact that only the actual agreement was signed 2 years later. At what stage were you in if you can tell me, of course, if I'm not violating any NDAs, at what stage was this conversation with GM or other customers? Was it like LOI or MOU, or you were discussing already term sheets at that time when investors were evaluating should they invest or not?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact status at that time, but as we continuously advanced a lot of customer processes in parallel, and then at some point, they will accelerate, and that can be because of a number of factors, and timing on their end is very important. They have a new campaign coming up, they need a new supplier. And I can't remember the exact status at that time, but obviously at some point it accelerated with GM, which led us to where we are now.
Okay, but let's then go back a little bit to the beginning of your talks with GM. How you got them interested at all to start this conversation?
I cannot go into too many details, Emin, but
No, just
yeah.
you went through your mother company, or it was like, or you just approached them at the conference. Hi, we are Vianode. This is our business card. We're making synthetic graphite. Would you like some?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. No, of course, at that time it was a trend to look for more local material and map out more local material. It's still today, mainly Chinese materials on the market for graphite. But Vianode had emerged as one of the most promising startups and one of the most mature companies. And we were basically talking to all relevant cell manufacturers. So I think they all knew us, and it's normal that you do initial sampling quite early, and then, as I said, the process will accelerate depending on, for example, timing.
Okay, so you basically, so can I say that it was the introduction was probably made through someone like LG Energy Solution, because this is the JV that's you going to supply the material to. So, and probably the LG were the team that actually validated your material.
It can be both on both ends, you know. So it can be the OEM that you have the contact with, and it can be the cell manufacturer. Can be both.
Mm-hmm. Can be both. Okay. What was the difficult part about convincing such a big customer? I mean, not initially, but in the process. I mean, you got them interested enough. Then you sit down at the negotiate table. Then you send them the samples, and you send them again, then again. Then they test. They like something. They don't like something. Then they get. Then the commercial team starts trying to, bend you one way or another with regards to timelines, prices, whatever, and whatnot, and then or some guarantees and so on. So in that negotiation process, which part you found like the most difficult for the company or for you personally to, if you were involved with it, actually to overcome or to meet the expectations of your client?
Well, I think the hardest part is getting there,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, getting to that stage where you start negotiating a contract. That is a big milestone in itself, and a lot of hard work goes into that, and a lot of iterations. So that's definitely the hardest part, and I think what's most important to an OEM such as GM is to have stable supply of a material that they know will work in their cars, and we convinced them that we could deliver that. So yeah, that's the most important thing. And from our perspective, it's also very important because we had to build a new plant to deliver on this contract. We are a scale up, and the contract, we always knew that would be critical to get the financing that we needed. So it's important that the contract is what we call bankable, and meaning that it has sufficient commitment from the counterparty to yeah to reassure investors and banks.
Yeah, I want to just emphasize a little bit here. When you mentioned the security supply being essential, also resonates with my experience in when I was discussing with an automotive company, also like a cell offtake, and they were saying, okay, even if you're, and we also doing like first of a kind plant, and they say, okay, if you are, say your cells are good, but then what we're really concerned about the security of supply and said that you can deliver that volume on time. Prices were actually, in my experience, prices were not so much discussed. We actually managed the price negotiations pretty easily, despite the fact that in my case, we were a little bit more expensive. But for them, like getting it in time, the required amount was paramount. So I believe yet, well, automotive clients probably the same all over the world. For them, the speed of production is important. So yeah, convincing them that you can actually do that. And did your experience and your track record of building this industrial scale pilot was useful? I mean, you say, look, guys, we kind of built this from lab to industrial scale. It took us so long time. We commissioned it. The equipment is like this. Okay, we're going to use a little bit bigger equipment in the next scale, in the next phase for you, but you can see from our track record that we can do it. Was that helpful in any way?
Absolutely. And not just the pilot, more so the Via 1, which was under construction. And but while it was under construction, we were able to take stakeholders there and show them, and it's a very, very impressive project. So that is yeah, completely critical. It gives us a lot of credibility.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for that. So before we close, I just have two more questions, and one of them it goes like a little bit in the thick of current affairs of the in the current affairs in US and between US and Canada. So you are mentioning that you mentioned that in the on the website on your website, so that you are going to build the second of a kind facility in the US Canadian automotive cluster that to serve your customer, the General Motors. And well, with all the announcements coming out of the White House in the US, does that affect in any way your strategy, your plans for building out this facility there?
Well, it doesn't affect our strategy. So our plant is we haven't disclosed the location yet, so we're just saying North America. And but I think anyway, wherever it will be located, it will not affect the strategy. It's yeah, to remember, this is a long-term contract, and start of operation will be in 2027. So it's definitely long-term, and both we and GM and other potential customers, they believe in the electrification of cars, transportation. So that fact doesn't change.
Okay, that's good to hear because I've seen projects derailed on purely political grounds, just because of some administration somewhere changed, and then everything has to be started again. And that's good. It's very reaffirming to hear amid the voices that I hear now that okay, now will US fall behind on its climate investments? Will the new battery factories be built or not? That's not only regarding the batteries, but other climate technologies as well. And
Yeah,
it's
but
really
I think yeah, I mean that's there is uncertainty in the world following this. And if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which was a big driver for the battery market there, and as you say, other renewables and so on, that is possibly going to be discontinued, and that will probably have negative effects for the battery market there as a whole.
but not for you.
No, not for us.
You didn't rely on the IRA, right? Not
No,
not
I can't comment
not
on
enough
any
to
of that.
pull the plug.
No, but
Okay.
we will be fine.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, Andres, just the last question, which I could traditionally ask for my guests. From your vantage point, I mean, you've been through this, so you did your pilot demo, first of a kind. You are going into your second of a kind amid all the political storm that is raging around. You raised funds, you did all that. What would you, what advice would you give to the teams that are now scaling up? They're out of the lab, they going to raise the next round, they're going to build a big factory. What they should look out for?
Yeah. No, I keep coming back to this circle, of you need customer feedback in order to get financing and in order to scale. And it's all about finding this balance and how big or small, right, should the next step be, and in order to push that circle and push towards positive cash flow. And finding that balance, I think um, we have had quite a lot of scale-up steps, and I don't see how we could have done it without it. So it has been very key, and we have managed to strike the right balance there.
So the key to striking that balance is to take these carefully measured steps with balancing what the client tells you and then showing the investors that this is what the client wants, this is how we're going to develop, get just enough money from investors to make that step, make sure that the step is successful, and then do the next step.
Yeah, and I don't think you should underestimate just financing risk, getting enough capital. And then it doesn't have to matter how profitable, how promising this project is. It's just getting that capital can be difficult no matter the financial calculations.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andres. Thank you for this insights. Yes, it's I always enjoy when I talk to people who been through that and can share this experience, which not many have, frankly speaking. And I think we need in the climate tech space, we need more of that. A little bit more openness, I would say. So thank you for coming to the show and sharing your experience. Because founders, when they listen to my podcast and they or watched it and I talk to them, say, well, this is the thing we wanted to know from others who actually done it, because this is the kind of experience we're looking for, and it's not widely shared. So thank you for sharing this. It was really exciting for me of taking the time. And all the best to you and to Vianode, and good luck with your second of a kind. And I hope then in a couple of years we'll be talking about the ends of a kind that you're building.
I hope so too, and thank you for the invitation, Emin. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Bye.